Yeah, I think a lot of people fetishize doing startups and being a founder and think it's this like awesome, cool job. And yeah, there are a lot of things that are great about it, but it's really for people who are like willing to eat glass and stare into the abyss, or like whatever Elon Musk said. Like you have to just be born like wired to want to do that and to wake up every day and have a different problem or challenge to solve. People think like they're done when they like launch their company's product, but like as we all know as founders, everything is a little project, a little challenge, and as a founder, you have like thousands of those before you reach an exit.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Founders in Arms podcast. With me, Immad and founder and CEO of Mercury.
And I'm Raj, co-founder of several startups. And today we have Roger Dickey, who is a founder's founder, in my view. He's been creating interesting companies for, I think, 15 plus years. You had an exit with selling Mafia Wars to Zynga. And then you started Gigster after that. I think you were running a studio, and Gigster was one of the companies out of there. And you've also started more companies since then, since you've moved to Austin. Roger is one of the most creative guys I know in the tech business, in tech industry. And that's saying a lot. I mean, a lot of creative people here. But Roger has like so many good ideas. He's the guy I go to whenever I want to talk about ideas. I think you have some crazy long list of like startup ideas, Roger, right? I mean, how long is your list these days?
Oh man, I mean, since running two startup studios in a row, actually three, if you count the studio we built our game out of, I've got this list of ideas over the last 15 years, probably 100 ideas in it. It's a shared Google Doc, so we can share it with the audience afterwards if people want to see it. Because I can't count how many times I sit down for coffee with people and they're like, what should I be working on? Or what's cool in AI? At some point I was just like, I'm gonna write all this down and make it shareable.
How do you come up with new ideas? Like, what's your process?
So we had at the last startup studio, we had a very like kind of structured process. So we call it the matrix approach. We would take spaces, like personal finance, healthcare, so like social gaming. We'd cross those with new technologies. So things like, mobile, AI, blockchain, VR, whatever. And within each one of those, cells in the matrix, you have a row and a column, and again, the column is like the space and the row is a technology or an approach. For example, like Lambda School pioneered like ISAs. So we're like, well, what can we use ISAs for? What is ISA meets homeownership or ISA meets personal finance? So we would brainstorm in each of those boxes. I would send out to the team like I think Tuesday and Thursday, I'd send out a list of 10 of those cells. And I'd say, hey, go home, think these over, and bring your best like three ideas in each cell. And then we get together as a team and just do a long team lunch and kind of debate ideas. We'd write down our favorite ideas, and everybody had to have like a 2 or 3 sentence pitch for each idea. And then after that, we would have people write a one pager for like kind of the best three ideas of the week. And then that one pager might turn into like a little prototype we build later. And it kind of went from there.
And you did this process like 15 years ago?
I did this at three different startups, actually. So the company that became Mafia Wars, we did a version of this. And then the company that became Gigster, we actually built 15 different prototypes before we found the idea for Gigster. And before the prototypes, I mean, we generated, I think, 800, 900 ideas. And that was for Gigster. We call that Liquid Labs.
Have you gone back to those ideas, and has any one of those ideas, like you did Gigster, but was there another idea that ended up being like a decacorn or like a really, really big company, and you were like, oh, I should have done that one?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Some of them we just missed, or like they didn't play to our strengths, so we didn't want to build them. But yeah, absolutely, there's some good ideas on that list.
Raj, what's your process for ideas? Because you're doing like three three right now. Like, do you have such a structured process for coming up with things?
I have a long list. And actually, Roger and I compare lists sometimes. So we talk about our list. I mean, my process is pretty straightforward. It's like problems that I've had personally that I think are more global problems. And also things that I've observed, like in the world, now I've had a bit more experience. So I've observed like some like discontinuities in the matrix, right? So things that like are working in one industry but not working in another industry.
Discontinuities in the matrix.
Exactly. Yeah. There's something strange. I mean, for example, like with Presto, we actually went public, right? So we went on the Nasdaq. We rang the bell and stuff, and it was a very unique experience, right? Like going through that Nasdaq thing. Then I was wondering, like, why are more like celebrations not like this, right? Like why are they less visible, no, or not as visible as like the NASDAQ celebration. And it turns out that a lot of people now just try to use the NASDAQ, and they go and they actually take pictures in front of Times Square for everything, for like Series A's and stuff like that, right? But I think there's actually like this market for celebrations and for visible celebrations in the world of social media. And so that idea was sparked by that experience, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be $1 billion company, but it shows that, it just kind of gets your thinking once you have an experience. Roger, I think you're a parent now, right? So there's a lot of ideas around. I don't know if you've been generating ideas around parenting, companies, because there's a lot of things to do there, I think.
Not yet, no.
I find that my process is like, I guess, somewhere between the two of you, not quite as structured as Roger's, but I like being like getting really annoyed with things, and America is like full of super annoying things, right? Like, I mean, Mercury really came from this. I was like, oh my God, I hate banking, and it's so annoying. And I think like combining that with like going like top down and saying, okay, what is the biggest kind of GDP sucks in America, right? Like finance is a huge one, and then it's like defense and healthcare and a few other things. So that's like a good kind of set of things to go after when they're like really huge TAMs.
Yeah. Roger, are a lot of your ideas also consumer? I know you have a lot of consumer ideas.
Mostly consumer. Yeah. That's what I have the biggest passion for. I mean, I really caught the bug for consumer when I was at Zynga post acquisition of Mafia Wars. It's just incredible to like wake up every day and, see that you had 5 million active users the day before. And you look in your database and like every record in your user table is a real human being who is having like a human experience using your product and telling their friends about it and, playing your game with their, grandfather, grandmother to stay in touch. And there's so many of those human stories and experiences we had at Zynga and at the games I made before I was at Zynga. I think my biggest game had a couple million users before Zynga, and every day I would go through my user table and I would just copy and paste email addresses out and email 10 people. And I would ask them a question like, hey, I saw that you got to level 7, but that you haven't played in like 2 months. Why is that? And they'd be like, oh, like I just got accepted to grad school, but I loved your game, blah, blah, blah. Usually you learn so many things, and that connection with that number of people, I think is really special. And of course in B2B, you kind of have that, but people are using your product as more of a tool. It's a different relationship.
Do you feel like it's kind of, I guess, I don't know, sad or something that like there hasn't been that many startups in consumer in the last 10 years, right? I'm having a hard time easily going like, oh, there's a huge kind of startup in consumer. I guess Uber, but that was more than 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think so a little bit. I mean, even like ChatGPT is very much a consumer thing. I think there are a lot of these kind of like I'll say dual use, even though that has its own like defense definition, but we'll say dual use consumer, enterprise consumer B2B. There's a lot of those like Figma. Like I was very envious of that. This guy, Dylan Field, sat there and just built this like vector editor in a browser, which I could code in like not probably 6 months, 9 months. I could build something with 80% feature parity, shipped it, seeded it with the right users, and it just blew up, and now, and it starts off, it's like the, classic grassroots B2B SaaS thing where people are using it on their own, like individual creatives are using it. And then they kind of upgrade because 10, 20 bucks a month isn't a big deal. Then suddenly teams at companies are using it. And suddenly it's this like massive SaaS tool.
I do think product-led growth is almost consumer-y, right? Like I think there's like Mercury has a lot of that. Like we have a few 100,000 users and we can go talk to them and all of that.
It's really fun talking to users. I really enjoy that piece at Presto where I can actually go to a restaurant and see people using the product and actually approach them and actually have a conversation with them. And actually also observe them using the product. That's actually the benefit of a hardware product is you can actually observe people using the product stealthily, right? And you can see where they're stuck and where they're laughing and stuff like that. It's really a fun experience, with a hardware product. It's harder to do that, when you have a mobile app like, for example, Tribe, a group chat, you can't really see people using the product. It's all, you have to use analytics and stuff. Yeah, there is this category where you mentioned Figma, which is like, would you call that product-led growth? Then it's like basically like you build a great product and you kind of see where it gets to.
Yeah, 100%. It's like self-service. It's, distribution even to big businesses is happening by like individual employees kind of picking it. I think that's like the quintessential product-led growth.
Yeah, I think of product-led growth slightly differently. Like I could see putting it in that category, but to me, it's something that's inherently like the core unit that you're building is inherently shareable. which makes it go inherently viral. Like something like Dropbox was the same way. You're putting files in your folder, but you're sharing them.
Yeah. I think that's different. That's from your Zynga days of like virality built in. I think that's really powerful, but I feel like that is a different word for it. Like I guess like B2B virality or something is maybe the word. There's very few examples of that though.
Yeah, anything that has a social element will have that, right? And so, yeah, Figma would have that. Actually, Tribe would have that too. And there's a few others. And actually, Mercury has that too, right? Because you have like these like payment requests and stuff like that, right?
Actually, a little growth hack that I was never truly able to prove whether it works or not is like relatively early on, when you send in payment with Mercury, it said in the memo via mercury.com. Because, normally the memo line is, yeah, exactly. But I never really quite proved whether it like drove usage or not. But I mean, must have a little bit.
I can prove it for you. It works, like because I use it all the time, and like people are like, "Hey, what's Mercury?" Like I have these conversations all the time. I work with a lot of people who don't know Mercury outside the industry, so they're all learning about Mercury through these like payment requests and things like that. So
I saw this really cool feature. I was talking to one of the execs at Wise yesterday, and Wise is it has a bunch of features, but one of the things is like you can store balances, and like very prominently in the app they have a feature where you can hide your balances, like top right icon, and the idea is that they want people to show Wise to their friends, but no one wants to go like, oh, look how much money I have. So they have this like really prominent feature, but it like prompts people to go, oh, I should like, why does this icon exist? And you click on it and your balances, it reminds you to do word of mouth for them. It's super smart, right? I hadn't thought about people think a lot about like generating virality, but people don't actually think that much about generating word of mouth. I thought that was like a pretty interesting kind of take of it.
That's classic product-led growth, in my opinion. Love that feature.
what do you think of Wise, by the way, Immad? We never talked about this, but Wise has also really kind of grown to become quite dominant, right, in this money transfer space.
There's like a little bit of fintech in London. It's like one of the few things that's working in Europe is like fintech in London, and it's just because a lot of it's driven by like international money movements, because in Europe people travel way more between countries, and whenever you travel between countries, it's so frustrating because all the previous kind of banking and financial payments were like basically price gouging on like those customers. So Revolut, Wise, at least mostly exist because of that environment, and now they're kind of exporting that across the world. And yeah, I mean, Wise is a great company. I use it all the time to send money back to the UK or whatever. If you look at their whole mantra, they're like trying to like kind of completely suppress the margins in this space. They're like, we're going to take 10 bips and wherever we can, we'll reduce the pricing. I think it's like super smart and really well executed.
Roger, what are you working on these days?
I am back to the drawing board, looking at starting venture number 4. Of course, looking at AI, but I think of AI as a horizontal. Like AI is a tool I could use to solve a customer problem, right? So like, what customer problem do I want to solve? Of course, a consumer looking at personal finance. I think finance is just a lot more complicated now, and you ask people where they put their money or how they're spending it, and or what a dollar even means. Like, it means one thing if you live in Thailand, it means another thing if you have $1 million in your bank account, you live in like New York City in an expensive high-rise apartment. So the actual value of a dollar is very subjective. And how to invest, like, you ask people, do you feel like you're investing your money right? And almost nobody says yes. So I think there's a level of conviction and confidence that our personal finance tools aren't giving us. So kind of that's an area I'm thinking about. Looking at gaming again, I think there's a lot of alpha still in gaming, and I wouldn't mind getting back to that. And then also social. I think our social networks aren't really serving us. They're creating a lot of division, doing a lot of really bad things for us culturally. So I'm looking at that as well.
In gaming, there's a few things I've seen recently, and I'm invested in a couple of them. Generally, I actually avoid gaming because I was deep in the gaming industry in my previous company, and after you're deep in gaming, or really in anything, it's hard to invest in it. But I feel like there's a few crypto games. I guess, what's your take on crypto gaming? Like, do you think that's a horizontal that you're exploring, or you think it's like not interesting?
I'd say more not interesting. I'm not really sure what blockchain adds. I mean, you look at the promise of it, and often it's positioned as you have portability. You have portability of game assets between ecosystems. Like I can get a sword in Minecraft and I can move that, golden sword to some other game. That's not really a burning need, though. I think there's a lot of asset movement inside of an ecosystem, but asset portability across ecosystems hasn't really been figured out. I mean, if you just think like, a little bit into the future on that, like that requires a lot of alignment between platforms about what does that game item even mean and how powerful is it? What are its attack and defense points, or however you have it game balanced? How does that then move into a new ecosystem or game? Until you solve that, there's really no use for blockchain. You can just use a database if you're porting assets around inside of an ecosystem. So I haven't really seen a need for it. I have invested in 3 crypto gaming startups, but that's because I love the founders. They have prior exits doing non-crypto gaming.
I wonder if you did the same ones I did.
Yeah, we can compare notes after. I mean, probably a couple of them. One of them was in Andreessen's speed run, which I think is smart. I'm glad they're doing that. Yeah, a couple of others.
What are you excited about in gaming? Like, I'm curious. I'm a gamer. I love playing games. What excites you?
You look at gaming in general, like it's just incredible to see like how much the market has grown, how much more mainstream games are now. I think mobile really helped with that, helped push games into the mainstream where everybody from like toddlers to grandparents are playing games. It used to be a lot more hardcore. So I think the market expansion is really exciting. It just means there's a lot more ideas you can go after. There's a lot more surface area, a lot more alpha. I think there are new business models too, like virtual goods and like, in-app payments that make it a lot more viable to do performance marketing effectively. Like you look at most games and like the way they're growing is kind of performance marketing. So I think the aperture is like wide open in terms of like what types of games you can build. And it's a bunch of crazy ideas. Like I know this guy who runs a studio in Thailand, and they just made this game that's about like knitting or something. And you're just like weaving thread, and they won like the Apple Design Award for games because it's just this really like fun, relaxing game to play. And that game has like no point, right? Like nobody would have made a game like that 10 years ago, but now there are just so many, the market's just so big, you can almost do whatever you want. If it makes you like feel good to use it, turn it into a game.
Is there any like new trend? Because I could feel like everything you just mentioned also existed about like 8 years ago or something like that. Do you feel like there's AI or something else that makes like a new why now for a game? Or do you think it's like actually just not enough people looking at gaming anyway, so there's lots of opportunity regardless of like a why now?
I think there's still a lot of opportunity. I mean, people are trying to use AI to make games more personal or more custom, or like procedurally generate in-game assets, or make smarter NPC characters. I don't really think AI is quite there yet. And I don't think there's an unlock around making worlds more deep or immersive. Like, I don't think that's why people weren't playing games before. I think worlds were deep and immersive enough. There's certainly enough single player content in games that take 100 hours to finish. And a game like Minecraft, you don't need AI because you're playing with humans, and humans are more interesting than AI. And there's more unique and generative content that's being made by humans that you see when you go in. So I don't really see where AI is going to be a big unlock right now. I think it's just kind of, as you said, like more Cambrian explosion of like people exploring this like very large market.
There's still a lot of innovation, right, in gaming and social networks and all these types of different markets, which are seen as kind of by VCs as mostly like, uncool or passé, or, I think VCs get up too obsessed with like, oh, there hasn't been a big exit in this space for like the last 10 years, so the space is dead. And as founders, I don't think we believe that, right?
I mean, VCs would have said AI was completely dead when OpenAI started. So like, those are probably the places to look at, to be honest.
AI's died like 6 times over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things, I think, in gaming, and I agree with that thesis. I actually know also people like working on like AI gaming, like basically easier game editors or game creators kind of tools.
But do we think the future will be like you prompt engineer a new game? You're like, hey, I like knitting, and I'd love a mobile game where you could just like knit all day, and then AI kind of generates the game.
I think that future exists for everything. I think SaaS is in serious trouble conventionally. I mean, a lot of SaaS tools are just databases under the hood, right? So you could be able to just generate your own UI that works like for your exact business. I can see that for gaming as well. But at that point, like we'll all be out of a job anyway. We'll just be living in some like UBI post-scarcity economy.
I think like translating like a Figma set of mockups to like a game will be very easy, at some point, right? Like where you can just take mockups and like translate it. And of course you can generate the mockups with AI too, but I think that'll be a bit harder.
I mean, I'm a bit skeptical that you could make a deep game with that. I think you could definitely make like a relatively simple like here's leveling and it gets slightly harder and it's like a casual game. So maybe like most of the talent goes into like deeper kind of world creation type things.
Yeah, and I think also like right now a lot of the best AI products are like AI plus a bunch of like rules-based, more traditional software. You're seeing this with some of the coding tools. Like I think I just saw that this one generative coding tool that's outperforming O1. It's not even like LLM based, right? Or it's like maybe partly LLM based. There's another one from the former CTO of GitHub that's part LLMs, but they also do a lot of kind of dynamic, like they'll take what the LLM outputs and then they'll like actually try to like run it in a virtual machine and see if it works. And often it doesn't, and they have to like correct it after the fact. So there are a lot of like hybrid approaches right now. And I could see if somebody was trying to make like a generative game builder, you couldn't just plug it into OpenAI as it is right now. You'd have to have like some rules engine. And to your point, like if you want leveling, you'd have to be able to like put in a leveling system, and the LLM might not do that. So you might need like human built modules. But if you glue those together with AI, I think you could get something pretty interesting.
You also have some AI players that play the game and say, "Oh, it's a fun game." Like, it just goes around in a big circle.
Testing, that'd be good, yeah.
I thought it'd be interesting, just to change the subject a little bit, to talk about kind of the entrepreneurial journey. I feel like, all three of us have done lots of startups and like seen highs and lows throughout it. Roger, when you think about kind of your Gigster experience, I remember for a while it was a super hot company. Then like, I guess it was under the radar, and it sounds like you got an exit out of it. What makes you, I guess, A, handle all of this kind of turmoil, I think, and then B, come back for more?
I think that's not really maybe talked about enough. It's not. I think a lot of people fetishize doing startups and being a founder and think it's this like awesome, cool job. And there are a lot of things that are great about it, but it's really for people who are like willing to chew, eat glass and stare into the abyss, or like whatever Elon Musk said. Like you have to just be born like wired to want to do that and to wake up every day and have a different problem or challenge to solve. People think like they're done when they like launch their company's product, but like as we all know as founders, like every day you wake up and there's like a different puzzle to solve. It's like, oh, I'm trying to hire this executive who I want to poach out of Dropbox. Like, how am I going to get this person? I'm going to have to like get on the phone with their wife and convince them to join, whatever it is. Like, there's just everything is a little project, a little challenge, and as a founder, you have like thousands of those before you reach an exit. Maybe 50 of those 1,000 come like before you launch, but then after that, there's another like 900 that you have to do. So you have to just like love to like start and successfully finish a lot of diverse little projects. And I think if you're that kind of person, you have to start companies because there's nothing else that's like it. I used to tell people like I didn't wake up wanting to like be a founder or start a company, but I like to work on hard problems with smart people and I want to make money. And if you put all those things together, like, you have to start companies. If you want to get adults to work on projects with you, you have to pay them.
I made this analogy actually earlier this week that like doing startups is kind of life on hard mode. Just to go back to the gaming conversation, it's like, I mean, you could probably have an easier life, but it's kind of fun to play life on hard mode. Yeah, Raj, what do you think? What was one of the, I don't know if you want to get too personal here, but what was like a really low point for you in kind of your startup journey, and like, what did you learn from that?
Many different low points, but luckily, like I don't get too low, so I tend to bounce back relatively quickly. I think at Presto we had a lot of big enterprise deals, and they're very binary outcomes. It's a little bit like elections. You have like long campaigns, basically running pilots for these big customers, and at the end of like maybe even years of effort, they'll tell you whether you won or lost, and you could get everything like tens of millions in revenue or nothing, right? And for a long time, I didn't know how to win those deals, but I was trying to figure it out from first principles because there's actually not that much knowledge of how to win enterprise deals in Silicon Valley, and it's hard to find people who have really truly done it before and can teach you. So I had to like basically learn by failing a bunch. So I had a couple of instances where, campaigning for a big deal over multiple years, whole team is super invested in winning. Everyone's working late night. And then at the end of it, they're like, nope, we're not going to go with it. We'll delay it for 5 years, or we'll go with a competitor or something like that. And those are heartbreaking, when that happens. And the good news is I learned how to win those deals later on, and we had basically almost 100% hit rate at some point. But learning the hard way is just like, it's tough.
Yeah, that's challenging. Weirdly, one of my hardest points, and I wonder if Roger relates to this, is like straight after I sold my previous company. And it's weird because it's supposed to be like the journey, like the end goal. Like it's supposed to be like, oh wow, you did it. Like, but it was just like it was really difficult. Like it was a very long 9-month process, and then at the end of it, you kind of lose the baby that you'd spent all this time kind of nurturing and creating. It's weird in startup world that these end goals are often like disappointing.
Yep.
One interesting thing I was thinking about is like, the process of finding product market fit is actually a very important skill that founders have that they always need, at every stage of the company. So like, probably right now you're launching a bunch of new products and you're thinking about like, how do I get product market fit with this new product, right? Like, so that skill set is probably useful at every stage.
It's actually almost harder when your company is bigger because you can, when you have nothing, there's no way to like fake product market fit easily. Whereas like at Mercury scale, we can launch something and we can get like 1,000 people using it very easily. And then you're like, oh, did it actually work? Like, did they actually like it? Or it's just because we have a funnel of users we can like send towards the product. Actually, it's tricky. When you tried all those different ideas, Roger, was there like a thing where you were like, oh, like this is product market fit? Like, was there like a metric you looked for? Like, how did you decide to like double down on any one idea?
Yeah, I think your analogy at Mercury of like false product market fit, that's something we would think about. You can fake product market fit if you raise a bunch of money and like pump performance marketing into something. Like it can make you think that it's taking off, but it's so important to be able to listen to those like kind of quiet signals and not overwhelm yourself with kind of, something inorganic. So we would try as much as possible not to spend money on launches. What we look for is pull, this feeling of pull or like overwhelming demand. Emmett Shear had this quote about product market fit saying it's like it's like turning a light on in a room. Like it's just a totally different experience. Or another analogy I've heard is like when you don't have product market fit, you're like pushing this boulder up a hill. But then when you do, you're chasing the boulder down the hill. It's like you got into the top and now you're at the top and the boulder's like going downhill and it's like crushing trees and houses and people. And you're like, whoa, boulder, go a little left, go a little right. You're kind of like directing it, but it's taken on a life of its own. And I think when a product really works, when we would feel that pull and we'd feel it start to just be this kind of like runaway train of people telling their friends about it and kind of joining, even at a small scale, like 100 people, they tell like 20 of their friends, you've got something pretty special at that point.
Yeah. I think distribution becoming easy is like kind of how I describe it. But Raj, in like enterprise sales, you spent years probably getting to what felt like full product market fit, right? Like I feel like in some spaces it takes like way longer to figure it out.
It does, yeah. And I think there's a model. I mean, I know in Silicon Valley, folks, especially, in venture studios, right? People will spend a certain amount of time on an idea, and then like if it doesn't take off, they kind of move on to the next idea. And I think both at Presto and Lyft, it took over 5 years to get to product market fit, and I don't see many founders like sticking it out. There are stories of founders doing that, but it's pretty rare, I think.
Did it take 5 years at Lyft? I thought it was.
Yeah. Well, Lyft started as Zimride, and it was 2007, and this was even before the iPhone came out, and Uber didn't start till then, right? So both companies, Lyft and Uber, really took off around 2012, and so like. Yeah, it actually took a long time, and Zimride Lyft had pivots along the way as well. So, but there were just like the founders, Logan and John and myself. We both, those guys stuck it out for much longer than me, and they were like, they just believed that carpooling would be a thing, and like people would want to use, share rides, and there was a lot of pain along the way to get there. Same with Presto. Presto had a lot of pain. There was a lot of times where people are like, why would I have a custom tablet on my table to order and pay? And, and these restaurant chains are very conservative. They're like all about the human experience. So like the idea of putting technology in a restaurant is, anathema to them. So yeah, it's very difficult to stick it out that long, and most people don't do that. Roger, I'm actually also want to talk about like your third company, which is like very different from your other two, right? I think founders might be inspired. What was the idea behind the third one?
So the third company was tech-enabled home renovations. We started with bathrooms. We wanted to make it as easy as pushing a button and like a room in your house gets remodeled. And there's a lot that goes into that, like principally three things, like design, ordering and procuring materials cost effectively, and then getting the construction done. So we just took that flow, productized it, built some cool 3D visualizations, some cost calculators, project management, flow, pricing tools, kind of a marketplace for the contractors to come in and get involved with the customers, communication software, all directions. We form relationships with around 100 suppliers from Home Depot and Lowe's, all the way down to, individual like tile manufacturers. And then we had about 200 general contractors on the platform. So, the whole thing from design to construction was kind of covered, and it was supposed to be a really streamlined experience. Worked well in some cases, didn't work in others, depending on the contractor and the market and the homeowner and what their needs were. But the outcome of that was we ended up selling the technology to Home Depot, and the operating business that did the home renovations went under. That did not work. So that was a low point for me. Very, very challenging thing to do operationally. And, that was the outcome of that. But at least the technology worked well.
What was the reason, I guess, the overall thing didn't work?
At a high level, like you talk to a lot of founders who've raised a lot of VC money, and I think they would echo this. We probably raised too much money and scaled too fast. We raised like $3 million and we did like a couple of home renovations with our technology, and they all went like really well. And we looked at the numbers and they were very contribution margin positive. So the average home renovation is like $35,000. You subtract our costs, we're making like $5,000 to $10,000 on each home renovation. And we thought, wow, if we just scale this up, it's gonna be a money printing machine. You scale it up and like things start to break, and the contribution margin starts to shift, and maybe you don't notice that. End of the day, like we scaled too fast, and operationally we were very weak in a lot of ways, and we were I think too cost inefficient, and that ended up ultimately kind of killing the operational side. Just like CAC was very high, our operational costs were very high. We ended up underwater on the margins.
I mean, one of the reasons we see so much more software-only innovation is that it is much harder than anything that touches like atoms. So it is. I mean, maybe it's like a little sad that like actually like our lives, like the physical lives, don't improve as fast as like our software lives do. But it is just so much easier to do software startups.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but you could see like when you can nail the physical one, or it's so much more inspiring. I mean, this week we had the Elon Musk rocket catch, right? It's always inspiring to see like when physical startups work. I think I'm excited that there's a lot more physical startups getting funded, and deep tech is a thing that's taking off. Immad, you invest in a lot of these physical like technologies, right? Deep tech stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's still probably less than 20% of my investments, but yeah, I do. I'm a real sucker for like space investments. And weirdly, actually, even the more crazy ones actually get like pretty good funding and like seem to, there's a lot of stuff happening in space. I was an investor in Inversion, which is like a company that like, there's no easy way right now to bring something from space back to Earth. So they're doing like re-entry vehicles. But, that's like a very kind of difficult idea, and that, like actually re-entry vehicles are like a very hard problem. There's only a few people that have actually done it, like NASA and SpaceX and a few people. So, but it's fun. I mean, it is, as you say, extremely inspiring. Like it's, I get way more excited about them than like the next sales SaaS startup that's gonna like add some efficiency to the sales process.
Yeah, I remember seeing Relativity Space, go across at YC, and it was like 3D printed rockets for space. I was like, they just took a bunch of buzzwords and glued them together. Like this will never work at scale.
Yeah, they did your Matrix.
They're just like, okay, like 3D printing cross space, like boom, let's start a company.
I think they've raised like $1 billion since then.
Yeah, no, they've done insanely well. Like I saw that one and I was like, I was like, I'm not even gonna talk to them. Like this is silly. But to your point, like so many cool ideas are getting funded in space.
So I guess, so Roger, the other question I had for you was so social networks. So what are you interested in social networks? You know, you've seen the whole kind of rise and fall of social networks. You know, there's a big trend in Web 2.0, and now it's not trendy anymore. What do you think is the opportunity there?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one actually is in the business model. I think advertising. I think AI is going to do a lot for advertising. And I say this, related to social networks because I don't know that this could be a standalone company. But if you look at someone like Facebook, they have a really big opportunity given how much they know about you and the relationships you have with brands, with friends, to show you ads that are hyper targeted, ads that will make you want to turn off your ad blocker. Like for example, let's say you have a friend who's really into Doritos. You could see an ad with your friend like holding a bag of Doritos, standing on like a dinosaur, like rocketing off into space. Like, hey, you should eat Doritos. And like, I'm gonna want to see that ad. If it's like Immad, like holding a bag of Doritos on a dinosaur, like that's really cool. Like, I'm gonna turn off my ad blocker to see that. Even if I don't click, it'll give me a very positive association with Doritos. And you might ask, like, why would people opt into that? Well, I would love to opt into being in like badass commercials doing cool things, like being the guy in the Old Spice commercial on a horse, super jacked, like holding Old Spice. Like I would opt into that. They can use my face all they want. And celebrities, can just be in any number of ads they want. So I think there's an opportunity around content, and it could be advertising, it could be other types of content that I think AI brings. Currently, like the agents, so to speak, on social networks have been humans. It's all like the agent to agent communication has all been humans. But I think we're going to see AI enter the chat, so to speak, in like very interesting ways. I think that's one opportunity. I think every couple of years we see a new social network launch, and I think that will continue. I don't think we're done on social networks. I think humans change and evolve over time. And as we evolve, like we'll want whatever the next TikTok is. So I think we do need founders continuing to work on that problem. And either we'll see something like TikTok grow into its own as the next big social network, or there'll be another Instagram style acquisition where Facebook will buy you for $1 billion. But I think there's a lot of alpha there.
I mean, TikTok was probably the most successful, maybe the most successful company in the last decade altogether. I mean, apart from maybe Tesla or something. Immad, have you thought much about this space? Have you made any investments in consumer?
Very rarely in social. I'm trying to think if I have any. I guess Substack. Does Substack count as social? I mean, it's media. The interesting, I guess, counter argument is it used to be that Facebook was like stealing time from TV or just actually you sitting around. Whereas now people are consumed by their phones already. So the only way a new social network arises is if it takes time from another social network, which obviously TikTok managed to do. But that does create like the barrier to entry of like open space is much smaller. So it is much harder, I think, to do a new social network. But I think there's ideas here. I mean, like people, weirdly, we have so many social networks, but people feel more lonely and there's like less community. So I think there's probably ones that can like bridge that somehow and like, do things in the real world that are still like kind of around social networks. There's a really cool idea. You can probably Google the idea, but it's like they drop like little treasures in like lots of different locations. And basically the app is like you open it and you can do it with your kids or whatever. And you can see like, oh, within a mile of you, there's like 5 like drops. And then you have to like find them and but it's like real life things and like different, it's all volunteer based network. So people are like running all the like, and then there's like little puzzles to like try to unlock it. And so it's like just for fun. There's like no thing behind it, but it's.
So the treasures are physical treasures?
Yeah, the treasures are physical. Like you'd like take like a silly crown and you'd like hide it somewhere and then there'd be a puzzle to like try to find it. It's like a global treasure hunt. I thought that was really cool, but it's actually been around for a little while and it's fairly popular but very like volunteer kind of run. But those kind of things are like I think probably in the next kind of social network it's like that. At least I would hope that.
Or it could be inspired by group chats. I mean, you look at like where a lot of people are going and you see, these like subreddits that are hyper vertical social networks, or you see people in a bunch of group chats with their friends. Like it might look more verticalized. It might look more compartmentalized. That's maybe what the future of social looks like. I mean, a lot of that behavior is happening, but if you can find a way to turn that into something new, I mean, that could be part of the answer too.
I think Raj has some opinions on that one.
I haven't caught you up, Roger, on what I'm working on. So that's exactly what Tribe is. It's next generation group chat app. So it's one of the companies I'm working on. So yeah, we should chat. It's exactly that thesis. I think group chats are ready for a next generation version. And I think group chats are like the best form of the internet. It's a way for people to kind of like be their authentic self, versus a lot of the internet is about performing. And Immad and I are in so many group chats together. And I think we we enjoy those conversations that happen. And there's a lot of really good conversations happening on group chats. It's really fun to see what's kind of emerged, almost as a antithesis to Twitter and some of these like more public internet, and Reddit, public, anonymous, type of conversations, on group chats.
There's a weird kind of FOMO around group chats as well. You're like, oh my God, what am I like? All the people listening to this are probably like, oh, what are Raj and Immad's group chats about, and how do I get in, kind of thing. And that's like, I think that's part of the appeal to kind of these group chats that are like not just family and friends.
Yeah, a lot of social things started with a little hook like that. Like Snapchat was like, oh, like the messages disappear. Like, what kind of messages am I going to get from people if they're disappearing? Like, that could be cool. So it's like, yeah, I think to your point, like having that kind of allure could be an interesting product hook or distribution hook.
Yeah. We should probably wrap, actually. If someone does want to speak to Raj and I, we're in a group chat together on Tribe that we'll link to at the bottom. That's about this podcast, and you can give us some feedback on that. And otherwise, subscribe, leave us feedback on all of the normal podcast and video channels. Really awesome having you here, Roger.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Should do this again soon.